Pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now, for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose. How are you doing this morning, Jerrod?
My man, I am in the high desert of Utah/Nevada. I went on a run the other day, and I was tracking my time, and time went back an hour. So somewhere on that run, I crossed back into Nevada.
Oh, wow. You must have been running far.
I don't know, it wasn't that far, but I was running up these mountains. So it's good, dude. It's good to see you because I've been out here kind of in the middle of nowhere. Haven't seen a lot of people in a while, so it's always nice to get back to society.
Yeah, I bet it is, man. So why do they call it the high desert? Is it really high elevation out there?
Yeah, it's high for the desert. It's like, I don't know how many feet. It's mountains. I'm up in the mountains. I'd have to Google it, but yeah, it's the high desert because you're not just flat and barren. You got mountains, and there's like a waterfall up the road. I haven't found it yet, but yeah, it's good, man. It's just living a different life for sure. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I have a kickboxing fight scheduled for Saturday and battling a little nagging injury right now. So doing everything I can to get 100% with that and enjoying life here in Florida. It's cooling down just a little bit, so that's been nice.
Yeah, that's good. Dude, you're coming up on a year down there.
Nah, hardly last 6 months.
When did you go?
April.
Oh, April, that's right. Yeah,
So
my daughter's coming up on a year. No, shit, I don't know what the hell. Somebody's coming up on a year. That's good, man. Well, I'm glad you're
yeah,
getting back in there, and you know how the deal goes. Injuries are part of the game.
yeah, yeah. But things are good. I'm grateful we're still rolling with the podcast, man, because it's been some transition, some new things, but grateful for Zoom, and it's just been great to get some positive feedback on some of our recent episodes, and it's always now it's a treat to get to see you, you know.
Yeah, well, careful what you wish for, because I'm going to start heading your way, and I might be just hanging out in your driveway before long.
Come on.
Yeah, so that's coming up. Our Men's Live with Purpose retreat, November 4th through 7th there in St. Petersburg. So get over to the website and get applied, and let's get you down there, and let's start living life with more purpose. So I'm excited for that workshop, and I'm excited to see the lives we can impact.
Same here. And quick shout out to Submission Nutrition. We just secured a sponsorship that will be sponsoring all of the delicious and nutritious oatmeal for the On Purpose Men's Retreat. They're my favorite oatmeal now. I actually love to get their pineapple coconut flavor oatmeal. So some dried pineapple and coconut in there. And they're made to be like the overnight oats, but I usually just do them in the morning, heat up my tea kettle, hot water in there, and they're delicious, man. So you men who are coming out to the retreat, we will be having Submission Nutrition oats for breakfast, and you'll really like them. So excited to see you guys there in beautiful St. Pete, Florida, here November 4th to the 7th.
Yeah, I love it. And that's for those of you that are like, oh, why are they giving us oatmeal? Because we're going to work out. Part of the retreat is physical, mental, spiritual, right? So it's all three components, just like the podcast. So yeah, we need to feed you some good, nutritious food. So we thank them for supporting us, and they are a good local company that Ali met back in Colorado, and yeah, I had their stuff as well, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Gonna be some good workouts.
Yeah, it'll just be fun, man. It's just good to get guys together and sweat, and I don't know if you'll bleed or not, but you might bleed if you cut yourself somewhere, and cry a little bit, and start just taking control of our lives and start living the life we really wanted to live, not the one that we think is reserved for somebody else. And that's what the workshop's for, and I think it ties in great to this week's episode, which is episode number 132. That's 132 episodes of your story, why it matters, and why it's needed. And I want to do something a little different this week. And you guys have heard Ali and I's story excuse me, over the last, we're coming up on 2.5 years now. And our stories are good and our stories are powerful, but so are yours. And I really want to spend time talking to the community and about the importance of finding and knowing their story this week. So, Ali, when you think of somebody you meet, right? Like if you were going to tell me about somebody that you've known that I don't know, what's the first thing you would tell me about them?
I would probably tell you about their characteristics first. Um, yeah, like, oh man, this guy is awesome. And then I would jump right into their story, or at least what I know of their story, right? Like, oh, this guy is awesome, man. He has great energy. He is actually a blah, 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 and this and then about him. Yeah.
Yeah, you go right to their story, right? And at the end of that, even though I've never met them, I would start to identify with them. Right? It's the same like when we read a book and that lead character, you've never met this person, you've never even seen this person, but you're starting to conjure up images of them. And you feel like you know them. And that's the value and the importance of people's story, right? Like your story is kind of your calling card. And it's kind of what you're known for. But how can you share it if you don't take time to recognize it? Or even find value in your story, right? I think that's probably the first step we got to look at is I want everybody in our community to stop for a minute and realize your story is equal to everybody else's story. Right? Like we put people on pedestals, right? Like, oh man, you should hear their story. It's crazy. Yeah, it may be crazy, whatever they went through, but your story could have that same effect on somebody else.
So, Jerrod, how do we really like identify our story? Like, let's say, especially for someone, so I have a friend of mine, we had lunch a couple months ago, and we were actually talking about our childhoods and sharing our story, and he said something like, I don't have that. I've been really blessed where I haven't had like that much adversity or trauma. Like I grew up in a very, good neighborhood, really safe, and always had, my parents always had money and not too much adversity in his life. So he kind of felt that there wasn't that much to share uh, from his story, or that his story wasn't very compelling. And I think he was kind of having a hard time with me in that conversation. I think only because I had shared some of mine, which was different than his story, right? That he felt his story wasn't as worth of sharing. And at the time, we were out to lunch, so we didn't really get too deep. But I felt like I told him like everyone's story is worth sharing, and that we can find value in all stories. But what would you say to someone like that of like, oh, well, I've had a pretty normal, right, quote unquote, normal life, not too much adversity. How would you tell them how they identify their story?
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think it's more common than we think where people don't realize their story has value. Right? A lot of people feel that way. And I would say this, like what were your obstacles? What were the hardships? Those are usually the pillars to your story. Right? And I don't care if you had the most perfect family ever. You had to overcome something. You had to do stuff. Right? Or maybe you didn't. And maybe your story is of how to raise kids in a perfect environment because you experienced that. So that's what I want people to understand. Your experiences are your story. But sometimes we only want to share the good experiences. We only want to share what we think is the positive stuff. But the reality is, it's the struggle times, the uncertain times that you get through that are actually the pillars of your story and the identification marks of where other people will look to you and go, okay, I've been through that as well. Like nobody's,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You think about like if you just think of anybody's story that you can recite verbatim, it's usually them overcoming something.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it was a privileged person overcoming something or somebody that has nothing overcoming something. That's where your story is. And why do we remember that? Because we find commonality with it. Right? We find common ground. Like, oh, Ali went through this. Well, I went through something similar, and I'm going through something similar, and he got through it. So, well, if he did this, I can do it too. Right? Like your story, and that's what I want people to understand. Your story provides hope. Right? Like that's literally what it does. If Ali can do this, well, then I think I can do this. So when you're thinking about your story, like you're not writing your story as it has to be perfect and it has to be flawless. Your adversity, your mistakes, your faults, those are all part of your story. That's how you got here today. Neither of us would be right where we were today if something else would have worked out in the past. Right? Like when you went to Texas, if you went to the oil bin industry and you loved it and you got drawn into that world, you wouldn't be here today. But because you didn't like something, you saw a different opportunity, you took risk. People thought you were crazy to walk away from the pay to go chase, work in the cannabis industry. But you saw something different. Right? So like every time we make a decision, that's a new place that's a new chapter in our story.
Yeah. And I love, speaking of stories, I love the title of your book, Extraordinary People in Ordinary Places. And I have that experience too of meet somebody and just hear a little bit about their story and think, wow, like that is an extraordinary story. You need to write a book, right? Or you need to get that out there and craft it into a story, because so many people out there have these incredible life experiences and aren't sharing their story, which could potentially impact so many people in a positive way if they would just find a way to craft their story. So another question for you, Jerrod, why is it important to not only know, but be able to craft your stories in a way that is deliverable for people to be able to know and consume?
I think that's where the lessons come from, right? And you and I've talked about this before, right? Where people use vulnerability as a buzzword all the time now. And sometimes I'll be like, well, people have to earn your vulnerability, right? Like I can't just be vulnerable to the world and expect good things. Like in my belief, like I should be vulnerable to my trusted group of friends because I know they will provide support and lessons and action steps. So to me, when you're crafting your story, like what are you learning from it? Like that's the important thing. Like as you go through it, like what am I learning? Like what mistakes were made? It doesn't have to be perfect. And I think too many times we're tricked into thinking we have to have this perfect story or nobody wants to know. Or we have to have this perfect ending. Well, a lot of times sharing the story as you're working through it is fantastic. How many times have you and I had issues or something going on and we're like, oh, dude, thanks for talking to me about it. It made me see it this whole different way now. Well, we weren't through the issue, but we were sharing the story of the issue with you or with each other. And somebody else's perspective helps guide us.
Yeah. So a little off track here, but I'm curious, is there anything limiting to crafting a story about yourself? Is there anything limiting about that?
No, well, only if you don't grow past your story, right? Like only if your story is you were the high school state champion at 18 years old. Now you're 40 and you're still wearing your
Mm.
state championship shirt, walking around with your state championship coat, and you haven't accepted that you're 40. you
Sounds
know,
like you may know a guy like that or something.
I don't know. I didn't win no state championship, so it ain't me. Yeah, I think, but your story should always be growing.
Yeah.
Right, like we constantly get that, Andrea and I on this new life adventure doing shit I've never done before. People are like, oh, you guys are growing so much. Well, we are because we're allowing ourselves to grow,
Yeah.
right? And that your story grows with you, right? You know what I mean? Like literally none of my story that I would tell you about my life today was what I intended when I was growing up. Right? Like I thought I was going to be a major league baseball player and doing all this. Like, so I could look at my life now and be like, well, my story is I was the kid that didn't make it to the big leagues. Well, that's not true, right? Like that was piece of my story, but what happened from that? Well, from that I did this, and then I did this, and I transitioned into that, and then at 32 I started doing jujitsu, and then in the 40s I was doing MMA fights. Right? That's all part of my story. But for some reason, we want to put weight on the things way in the back, way in the past, and allow them to carry to weigh more heavily on what our current story is. Right? Like I want people to look at your life as a book. And if I'm going to read the book of Ali Abusalam, in chapter 1 is his little kid stuff, and chapter 2 he's a teenager and he's in Texas, and then chapter 3 he's 30 but he's talking about being a teenager in Texas. In chapter 4 now he's 40 but all he wants to be is 18-year-old. Why would I keep reading this book? Where's the growth in that story? But now, 18, next chapter, Texas, Ali's wearing cowboy boots and using his Texas accent to sell, to buy gas and oil rights. Oh, wait, what was the next chapter? Oh, now he moves to Denver and he's in the cannabis industry. Oh, now I want to get to, right? Like, that's what excites you, and that's why people will migrate to you.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, right? You need to continuously be developing, and a lot of people can stay stuck in an old chapter of their story and just think that's how the story goes, right? And the same chapter continues to just be replayed. So this perpetual development. And one thing recently, Jerrod, that I've seen is, especially in being someone who likes to write down goals and achieve goals, and sometimes, even though I know this lesson, sometimes you kind of think like, all right, like once I hit this, that's gonna be,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be happy, I'm gonna be set, and you get there, and then you realize, okay, now it's a brand new story, right? You have brand new obstacles, you have a brand new plot, you have a brand new chapter, because behind mountains are just more mountains. So you solve this one problem in the story. Surely there's another one that's going to come up, right? And I'm sure maybe you can speak a little bit on how for so long this has been your dream, right? Of you sold your house, kids are out, like you're on the road, and you probably thought like, oh man, cruising into the sunset, and now it's a whole brand new story, right? With new problems, with new obstacles, and new goals to get to, even though this was such a long, like lifelong goal. Can you speak a little bit about that, of like, for a long time your story was like, that was kind of as far as you could see, of like, that's where you want to get to, but now this whole new chapter unfolds
Yeah.
for you. how
Well,
how what is that like?
Well, first off, I'm gonna tell you, it wasn't my dream. This is Andrea's dream. Like this was, dude. I had never had no trucks or campers, and if you'd have told 20-year-old Jerrod, you'd took me out here and dropped me off and said like, you're gonna be out here for a week, just living, and you're gonna see 3 other dudes, I'd have been like, no way.
You would have been like, by choice?
Yeah, I know. What am I in prison or something? But no, dude, this is growth. And when I think that's something people got to realize, when you allow yourself to move beyond and create new chapters, you're growing, right? So like every day I'm out here, if I face something new, I get to learn something new. and you know, I'm excited to see where this story goes. I don't know where it goes. It's just like, but you had a great analogy. Just the other day, I was hiking Volcano Peak over here, and it's an old dormant volcano. And I was going up this road. It was like a little Jeep road, and I saw this little cool trail peaking, going to the top. And I was like, oh, I want to take that. And I start walking that trail. I notice it keeps getting narrower and narrower. And as we're going around the corner, I can barely fit my foot on the trail. And I start looking like there's no footprints. They're hoof prints. So I'm literally on an animal trail, right? But when I take that corner, I go up and around. There's a whole nother mountain like I didn't even see back here that if I hadn't taken that trail, I never would have found. Now, I'm not recommending that trail because it was kind of scary. I'm not going to lie. But that's kind of life, right? Like if we just stay on all the trails we've already been on, then our story doesn't evolve. Our life doesn't evolve. Sometimes you got to get off that path.
Yeah.
And I
And
like when we look at like what attracts me to this story. Well, it's usually where they like something about them, some hardships, some struggles, the overcoming, the growth, and what do they do next. But a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to live our own stories.
mhm.
We're like stuck in chapter 2 of our story, the thing that didn't work out, the thing that went bad in our life. And that now dictates the next 10 chapters of your story.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've been there too, right? And something that really helped me move forward is realizing that you are not your past, right? At any given moment, you can change your story. In one moment, your life could change forever. It could be that moment in the story of where Arthur pulls the sword out of the stone, or they find the ring in Lord of the Rings. That one moment that shifts and change everything that could happen in your life. It could be a phone call. It could be a meeting, meeting one new person who has an opportunity of a lifetime. It could be, uh, learning a new skill, whatever it is. It could change a new job, a new career path. It could change the trajectory of your life forever. That's what's so exciting about life, is that in every moment or in every decision, the trajectory of your story can change forever. But that is only if, like you were saying, you take on new paths. If you're going in the same circle, the same path, seeing the same people, doing the same things all the time, it's a lot more unlikely that you're going to have a story change. So it's important to realize that you are not your past. And guess what? Every day you get to choose, who do you want to be? You get to choose that every single day. Yeah, you have a history and maybe part of your story is already written, but you are the author and get to write the rest. You get to write from now till the end, and you don't know when the end is. So make sure that whatever you're writing moving forward is exactly what you want it to be. And I think that's the biggest piece, is getting clarity on who do you want to be? What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? And why do you want to do that?
I would even add there, how do you want to be remembered? Right? Because like your story is what's remembered. And that's some of the danger if we don't ever share our story. Then all the lessons we learned, all the things we went through and persevered, nobody else can learn from them with us. Right? Like think about it. That's the danger if you don't share your story. Then all your talents, all your great ideas, all the things you've done potentially die with you. Right? And why would we go through life accumulating experiences and knowledge and skills and not pass them on? Right? I mean that's the danger there.
Yeah, I think The only reason we would do that is because we believe that our knowledge, skills, and experiences is not worth passing on. And
Nothing could be farther from the truth.
exactly.
Right? It's just like we were talking off air. You were talking about, doing a little video series to chronicle your way to professional fighting. And you said, well, if I only have 2 or 3 fights, that'll still be worth it. Absolutely, it's still worth it, because every professional fighter that gets to 100-0 at one point has to only have 2 or 3 fights. Every amateur fighter that starts out dreams of having 2 pro fights. Every little kid that's in his garage, begging his dad to hold mitts or punching trees or whatever he's doing to get his fighting out will need to have 2 or 3 fights. Right? So everybody's story is important. Everybody's story can bring value to others. And I think what we got to get over is not believing our own story and not understanding the worth that it carries. Because let me ask you this. To all our community members, if you knew you could go out today and share your story, share the hardest thing you overcame, how you overcame it, and what you learned from it, to 100 people, maybe at the grocery store or whatever, and one person would come to you and go, man, thank you, that changed my life, would you do it?
Yeah.
Everybody would. But guess what? If we share it on social media, or we share a little glimpse on social media, and we only get 1 like instead of 100, what do?
Nobody likes it.
It's a failure, right? So one, we got to get away from that kind of metric and just realize you don't know when your story is going to impact somebody. You don't know when you're going to cross paths with somebody that needs your story. But if you don't know your story and you haven't come to terms with being able to understand the importance and to share your story, it'll die with you. Right? And I've used this quote a couple other times. I forget who said it, but it says that you die 2 deaths, right? You die when you physically die, and you die the last time somebody says your name. Well, I want those to be super, super far apart. But what would live in between is your story and the impact you made.
Yep. So the dangers of not sharing your story is you're going to die again quickly if you don't. You got to put your life, your experiences, everything that you accumulate in your life in a way that you can share it and tell it in a story. And know that your story matters no matter what it is. There's over 7 billion people on this planet. Guess what? There's at least millions and millions out there that can benefit from you sharing your story.
Yeah, and you don't know who they are, right? So, I'll just tell you, one of the best things about this new adventure for us is, the other day, we were at the Idaho Heritage Museum. Never heard of it, never would have been there. And I got to meet Jerry Lee Young. Dude's in his mid-70s, had a double heart attack. He hunts big game all over the world. Yeah, I mean, just he lives with Native American tribes, and he lives up in the Arctic part of his time, and just a crazy, cool story. And he even took his story and built a museum out of his life. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs their own museum, but it is a pretty cool idea.
Yeah.
But what if he would never have shared any of that? And he has kids' schools come out there on field trips, and whether, he has a bunch of Native American artifacts and stuff. And think about a little kid that maybe would never see a certain thing in their life because their travels don't take them there, can see it in a museum because he shared part of his story. Right? And I think that's one of the things we understand with our stories is when I share my story, Ali maybe doesn't have to have that same experience, or maybe he will never have that experience. because he wasn't where I was, but he can feel it. He can understand it. And that to me, you know, going back to you talking about this crazy adventure of learning new stuff, that's my favorite thing, is just meeting people and hearing their stories.
Yeah.
And I think when you go into conversations and you meet people and you're like, dude, I want to hear their story, you talk way less and you listen a lot more. And people are usually pretty grateful to have met you. Because who doesn't want to
100%.
share their story?
Mhm.
Right? So that's what I want to challenge the community this week for, is start working on coming to terms with your story. And that doesn't mean you have to be perfect. The imperfections are the best part of your story generally. They're the most intriguing. Start identifying your story and really ask yourself, why, if I'm not sharing my story, what's holding me back? And I really want you to write down, if I don't share my story, who doesn't get to learn about this? And I bet for a lot of people, it's going to be your kids. Your loved ones will never know. Right? Think about that, you know. You pass away and your kids say, well, I really never knew my dad's story. I never knew really why my mom or my dad got to this point in life. Right? Like, our stories are powerful. Your stories are powerful. But they're only as powerful as us being able to share them. So I think that's
Right.
some good work for our community this week.
Amen. One of the most important things you can do, identify your story, craft it, and share it. And if you guys have any specific questions or need any help, you can always shoot us an email at onpurpose.official@gmail.com, and either Jerrod or I would be happy to get back to you. And then once again, head on over to our Patreon page, to where you can get a lot more direct access to Jerrod and I by subscribing to one of our membership tiers, anywhere from $2 to $50 a month. Yeah, that's right. I said there's a $2 a month membership. So if you're getting any value at all, hop on to one of those memberships. At the $25 level, you get a once a month mastermind meeting with Jerrod, myself, and other Patreon members in the OPP community. And we explore lots of things, like crafting your own story, like clarifying your mission, like clarifying your life philosophy, and things like that. So head on over, guys, and keep living with passion and purpose.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.